So today I'm going to be ripping in to the standard 701. Strip it back, get some mild port work happening. Finger ports, widen out the exhaust port, all the fun stuff. Yeah, let's get into it. It's another handy dandy modification to think about when pushing more RPM out of one of these engines is reeds. So we got standard set of the stainless steel reed pedals in there. That's alright if you're just cruising around being a normal person, but we're going to be pumping a lot more RPM through it, and you don't want to snap one of these pedals off, have it go through the engine and destroy everything. You'd rather snap one of these bad boys. Got these handy dandy Carbon Tech reeds. Going to be replacing those, just preventative more than anything. In case one breaks off, it goes through, it will just munch up instead of destroy the internals. So it's not too bad. Been running a little bit of the castor oil in here, probably about 15 tanks. Not too bad. And initial check there. Bit of carbon on the pistons. Nothing serious, you can't be upset with that. Let's get this jug off and port this baby. So we got the exhaust manifold off. Not too bad, but you can see the gasket edge was catching the exhaust gases coming through. So what we do there for the porting is we're going to get the new gasket and the B-pipe manifold. I'm going to set it on there and grind back to a perfect match on the gasket edge on the new manifold, as well as out here on the exit for the exhaust port. That's going to help the gases come out nice and smooth, better flow through the motor when we do that mod. Break the jug away, release the seal, out it comes. It's not too bad. Alright. No porting in this region. I'm going to tidy up. Transfer port webbing. There. Got the transfer port back there. Down in there. It's absolutely shocking. There it is, just that edge there. It's like a ledge. This thing didn't line up well from the factory at all. I guess you could tell that just by looking at the factory stamps. A 16 and a 20, that's way out. So if you had zeros, that would be perfection, but this thing's miles away from perfect, so we're going to do the port work, tidy it up. Finger ports are going to come through the intake, tidying all the way up through here. Do some rounding in the transfer port, epoxy filler case here, all the way around. I'm not going to need to epoxy fill the back of the case, because we're not going 760 on this engine. We're still beginning to run the standard pistons, get as much use as I can before we need to go overboard. Talk about that in a few years when it's time to get some bigger pistons in here, when it's well worn out. I like to get my money's worth of what's on the table, so let's do it. Start pumping some higher RPM out of the 701. So when I initially pulled the engine out for the swap to test out the ported 730, I did notice a lot of oil in the bottom of the generator housing, which means we got a little bit of a naughty seal. So that's getting replaced, of course, when it all goes back together. It's time to flip her upside down, pull the case bolts out, start getting the Dremel in there, poured it all out. So just locked off the engine mounting plate in the vise here. You can see I got stacks of oil dripping out of it. I'll be in the off season, I always like to fog it out with the fogging oil. Just helps coat everything in the off season when you're going for like 2-3 months or more without using the thing. Stop things from your crank bearings and webs rusting out. That can cause all sorts of grief. Especially with this RPM you put through these things, you don't want to be running rusty bearings. Those things blow up, send cages through the engine, destroy it. You will not be having a fun time if you get rusty internals. So there's a little bit of a trick to be learnt here when it comes to splitting the cases. You think, oh geez, how am I going to get it apart? I'll stick a screwdriver in here maybe and hammer it in and destroy the seal edge there. Just beat on it till it comes apart. Well, the easy way is just to wind in some of the bolts and use them to separate the case. Just gently work them out and the case will separate. Look at that, she's coming apart and I didn't even destroy anything. That was easy. Tricky, easy, easy, tricky. There you go. So that's all broken apart. Just going to wrap it up in plastic while the rest of the bits get ported. But the thing I noticed when I pulled it apart, it's just a little bit of grease everywhere. Not one little bit of silicone. That just goes to show that Yamaha know what they're doing. That's machine precision, no problems. Happy with that. Alright, it's begun. So what I've gone ahead and done, here where the epoxy's gonna fill, I've put the lip in, the cavity, to help stop the epoxy from popping out on the edges. So I like the idea of getting it done quick, so what I've chose to use is the putty, steel kneaded putty. I've had a lot of success with this stuff. It dries like 5 minutes, solid as. Just gonna have to spend time fiddling with it, getting it down. Let's get it done. Can start doing the finger points and transfers and get it all tidied up. Cool. Alright. So what we're going to do is check the sealing surface on the crankshaft before we install some new seals. They do get rusty and nasty looking, just a tiny bit of a groove that you can't even get my finger in there. That's good. So what we're gonna do, lube it up some of the wet and dry sandpaper. Just gently tidy it up, give the new seal the best chance. We want them right without leaking on the new build. There we go, we've sunk the crank back into the case. Very important to make sure everything's lined up. Seals in its groove. All the bearings need to be located in their pins. That's all lined up alright. No issues. So what I will be doing when I reassemble it, being something of a more high RPM now, going to be putting a very small bit of sealant around the edge anyway, just to be safe. I don't really want to find out it's leaking when I'm out running around. There's a right and a wrong way to do that. The very smallest amount needs to go on the edge. Nothing gluggy. Let's get it together. Alright. So, you need to be very sparingly with the sealant when you do put it on. One spot you do need to put a little extra in the corner edge where the case meets the seal. All 4 spots. A little bit extra in these areas. A little dab across the bearings, just to help them not vibrate too much for the higher RPMs. So what we'll do, very carefully turn it into thin streak across the cases, staying away from the inner edge. Don't want that stuff floating around in the cases. And yes, you do need to seal the entire surface where the cases meet. We're trying to seal the unit. Even here, the generator housing, you want it to be all sealed up. Don't want water leaking back through anywhere into the starter motor when you get water in the hull. So we want to keep it out of all of these places. Then we get it all together and torque it down. Another thing to do when assembling, there's another little trick to it. So put a very, very, very fine layer on this surface, a little bit extra where it's needed. And on the other side, I've put also an even thinner layer just across the entire sealing surface. Now what I'm doing with that is, if there's any cleaning fluid or paint or something somewhere, you can sort of smear through it and figure out, oh hey, there's a little bit of solvent there, it's not sticking. And you can give it another proper clean and recoat it, go again. So that way, as a guide, it'll help you find out if there's a little bit of muck or dirt somewhere that you don't want it, just by smearing on the sealant. Bit of a trick. Let's get some carbon reeds installed. Whoa! Alright, there we go. Carbon reeds are in. So, installing these ones, can you read they are directional? There's a slight curve to the reed, so you want to make sure it's facing down. And that way it will seal up against its cage. Otherwise it will arc up and it won't seal if you have them upside down. Not too tricky, these ones. Yeah, I'm liking them. Recently installed the Boyson dual stage reeds and they didn't seal quite right, but these ones, beautiful. Sealing up perfect. Like to use a little bit of Loctite on those screws. I don't want to see them come loose and go through the engine. That should help that. Let's get it on.